What is up, guys, and welcome back to GameBird Classic. Man, oh man, what a year to be a Nintendo fan. More specifically, though, a Zelda fan, as we got Tears of the Kingdom, one of the best, if not the best, Zelda games ever made. And even though it's going to be a while before we get the next entry, mainline entry, in the series, have no fear. There was an interview that was recently done with series producer and Tears of the Kingdom director, and they gave us some cool information. Spoiler alert, the next entry is not going to be a sequel to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and I think that is fantastic. That gets me so excited. I'm going to explain why today in this video, as well as where I think the series could or might go next. So strap in and bring a change of pants, because we're getting started. So recently, Game Informer got to do this excellent interview with series producer Eiji Aonuma and Tears of the Kingdom director Hidemaru Fujibayashi. I'm not going to read the entire interview, but I will leave a link to it in the description box down below. There's some good stuff here, so be sure to read it. So here we go. I'm going to start with a great question from Game Informer. They asked, Tears of the Kingdom plays off Breath of the Wild, but the addition of Ultrahand adds so much more to the core experience. And it now feels so integral to the experience and so important to those more casual fans that you mentioned bringing in. With that in mind, do you think we'll see Ultrahand in future titles? Eiji Aonuma says, when you're talking about Ultrahand, that is really a core idea for Tears of the Kingdom, and I think it represents our approach of putting kind of everything we could into this game. You know, first putting all of our ideas in, and then being very selective about what we wanted to remain, removing all of the parts that didn't make sense or didn't fit perfectly. This game then is a result of that selection process. This time, you'll see there's no DLC because of that process. We created what we wanted to create, and we felt that it was complete in that fashion. So from that aspect as well, I think we definitely won't be including Ultrahand in titles going forward. So this is a cool question and response because it kind of reiterates that idea that Nintendo wants to do something fresh with each new entry in the series. And I mean, we got that from the jump to mechanically from the jump of Breath of the Wild to Tears of the Kingdom. Breath of the Wild's big focus was on exploration, the physics engine, as well as the Sheikah Slate abilities. Tears of the Kingdom, yes, it built on all of those things, but it did away with the Sheikah Slate abilities for Ultrahand and the ability to fuse anything and everything in the game, making everything this kind of like, turning you into like a mad scientist where anything and everything could be a weapon, a contraption, a vehicle, whatever. And so it sounds like they got the most out of this mechanic, and they're ready to do what they normally do with a new Zelda entry and kind of concoct some new fresh ideas and new mechanics that we're not expecting. And I think the sky's the limit for them. I think they really proved that anything's on the table with this last game. So I cannot wait to see where they go next. And this is kind of the first indication too, with Aonuma saying that, you know, they got everything they could out of this mechanic, and why there's one of the reasons why there's no DLC for this game, which kind of hints at no sequel coming. But let's jump further in this interview. All right, so here's another great question from Game Informer and an exciting answer, in my opinion. Game Informer says, in that same notion where you did earlier this year confirm that there won't be any DLC for Tears of the Kingdom because you've already accomplished everything you want to accomplish with this game, have you ruled out another direct sequel? To which Eiji Aonuma laughs and says, well, that would be a sequel to a sequel, which is getting a little bit wild when you think about it. But as I've mentioned previously, with Tears of the Kingdom, we were seeking to build on top of the world that we created with Breath of the Wild and really exhaust the possibilities of what we could put into that world. I think it is, to use a bit of a term, an apotheosis, or final form of that version of The Legend of Zelda. In that regard, I don't think that we'll be making a direct sequel to a world such as that we've created. One thing that's really funny about this quote is he talks about how it would be a sequel to a sequel, which is wild. And I think that's a little bit funny just because, it would basically just turn it into a trilogy, which isn't an odd thing, but it would definitely be a first for Nintendo as far as mainline Zeldas go. But this is the quote that's really exciting to me. I love Breath of the Wild, and I especially love Tears of the Kingdom, which I think is a far superior game, personally. But I'm ready to move on. One of my absolute favorite things about the Zelda series is that typically when we get a reveal for a new game, we get a brand new art style, we get a brand new theme, we get a really cool new mechanic, we get new versions of the characters, new versions of Hyrule. So one of the sad things with Tears of the Kingdom is it was the same art style, same characters, except obviously there's new characters in the game, but same versions of the characters from Breath of the Wild. And that same version of Hyrule, although different, it takes a little bit of the excitement because I think as Zelda fans, we've been spoiled with something fresh almost every time. Of course, there is that anomaly like Majora's Mask and Tears of the Kingdom, and I think those two games are perfect examples of making up for using a lot of the same assets by creating extremely unique mechanics that are kind of genre defying. I think Majora's Mask was way ahead of its time when you consider that kind of Groundhog's Day time mechanic where you can forward time, reverse time, slow time, speed time, go back a day, go forward a day. Really, really cool in how well they integrated that entire game and story within the time mechanic, and they even integrated that into dungeons. I think that was phenomenal. And Tears of the Kingdom with Ultrahand and the fusion and a lot of your really cool Ultrahand abilities that, on a technical level alone should have been game destroying. Somehow the Zelda team and Nintendo pulled it off. The game's a miracle. But now that's come to a close, and we are in what's going to be this extremely painful wait for a new entry in the series, but we get to look forward to a new theme, big new mechanics, a new version of Hyrule, or my big hope is the return to ocean exploration like we got to see in Wind Waker. Wind Waker is timeless, especially the art style, but I like to think about that mechanic of exploring the sea and what the Zelda team could do now on more modern hardware, especially with the successor to the Switch, and incorporating land exploration with huge open sea exploration. I think that sounds freaking exciting. That's all I'm going to pull from this interview. Again, I'm going to leave the link in the description box below, but I also want to discuss one more thing that Eiji Aonuma did say. At the 2023 Game Awards, IGN got a chance to speak with Eiji Aonuma also. They asked some really great questions. Again, I'm going to post the link to this article down below in the description box. IGN says, "It's interesting to hear you say that because one of the discussions that I've seen among Zelda fans is, gosh, I miss the more traditional linear Zelda of the past. And I'm wondering, how do you feel about that given the direction of the series toward a very free-form, open-ended kind of design?" Aonuma responds, "Well, I do think we as people have a tendency to want things that we currently don't have. And there's a bit of a grass is greener mentality, but I also think that with the freedom players have in the more recent games in the series, there's still a set path. It just happens to be the path that they chose." So I think that is one thing I kind of like to remind myself about the current games that we're making. But also, it's interesting when I hear people say those things because I'm wondering, why do you want to go back to a type of game where you're more limited or more restricted in the types of things or ways you can play? But I do understand that desire we have for nostalgia, and so I can understand it from that aspect. So this is one of those answers that I think is going to have a lot of traditional Zelda fans kind of like sounding the alarms, but don't be alarmed. I don't think it's as scary as a lot of people are going to interpret this. Now, listen, do I think Nintendo's going to bring Zelda back to the traditional days of the more linear version of the series? No. No, not in my lifetime at least. Not with the mainline 3D open world ones. Maybe with the 2D Link to the Past style top-down isometric Zelda games. Maybe there they'll stick to those staples. But listen, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have outsold any previous Zelda game by the most massive margin you can imagine. So there is no incentive for them to go back. However, that doesn't mean that we can't continue to see more Zelda staples implemented into future open air, free form, go wherever you want style Zelda games. Look at, with Breath of the Wild, we had the Divine Beasts. They were a pitiful substitute for dungeons, in my opinion. However, in Tears of the Kingdom, we got something much closer to a traditional dungeon with phenomenal, unique boss fights at the end. Now, were they as good as traditional Zelda dungeons? No, but they were a massive step in the right direction. And that tells me that Nintendo heard fans, and you see it in this interview. If you guys read this interview, you see they saw people clamoring for more traditional dungeons, and they did that with this game. I think they could go even further in future entries of the series, and I don't think there's a limit to what they can do as far as dungeons go, as far as bringing traditional items back, as far as telling a more streamlined story. I think they can find ways to do all of those things within this new kind of reimagined open world Zelda formula. There's so many possibilities, so don't feel like all of that stuff is gone, because I personally don't believe that. If anything, I think we're gonna get something closer to the traditional dungeon experience in the next entry, and I'm excited to see Nintendo do a more perfect blend, a more perfect hybrid of what made the old Zeldas great with what makes the new Zeldas so innovative and fantastic. I'm talking brand new mechanics that we'd never expect in a million years, like Ultrahand and the fusion mechanic where you can just fuse everything in the game. Blowing minds. Nintendo has been blowing minds with the last two Zelda entries, and all that tells me is that nothing is out of the question, and that Nintendo is going to be full of surprises with this series going farther, because they're not going to want to deliver something less than before. They're going to want to continue to deliver something greater than before. So I have very high hopes. Do not be discouraged, for there is nothing to worry about. The Zelda series is in phenomenal hands, and I cannot wait to see where Nintendo takes this series next. I have such a good feeling about what's next to come, even though I know we're going to be waiting a lifetime. What's to come between that? Who knows? Obviously, we have Grezzo, who's been working on Lord knows what since the Link's Awakening remake, and, you know, what about the possibility of another remake or remaster of a classic Zelda title? I would not be surprised. I know something Zelda is coming sooner than later, before our next big announcement for a mainline Zelda game. Man, it's gonna be quite a wait, but one that will be well worth it in the end. But what do you guys think? Sound off in the comment section below. I want to hear your thoughts. Let me know, are you bummed that we're not getting another sequel? Were you kind of hoping that we'd have this first time Zelda trilogy experience? Or are you excited about that return to form and that Nintendo's doing a fresh start, a fresh take, a fresh art style, all that good stuff? I know that that's what I'm personally excited about. Sound off below. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit that like button. Really helps the channel out. And don't forget to smash that subscription button. Do I really have to remind you? I'll see you all on the next Gamebird Classic. Peace.